This is how you install trim. Don't worry, there's still hope for you. In today's video, we'll go over how to fix these holes, maybe not that big, and how to fill these gaps and make it as seamless as possible. Hi everybody, welcome back. I thought I'd make a quick video today just to show you guys how to DAP or caulk the corners of your trim. Now, if you do it right, it might end up looking something like that or even less. And that looks really good and easy to fill. But if you live at my place, you end up with something like this. So there's a couple different ways that you can fasten your trim to your studs or your drywall. You can use this nailer, a pneumatic nailer, or you can go old school and do a nail and a hammer. So we're going to show you the three ways. Each one leaves a different size hole, and we'll also be showing you how to fix those holes. So once you found your studs here and on the edge, you can actually go ahead and use your tools, and I'll show you the different holes it makes. So this is a 23 gauge pin nailer, and I'll shoot 2 holes here. Now if you don't have a pin nailer but have an 18 gauge brad nailer, you can do the same thing. Find your studs and shoot your 2 holes. And if you don't have any tools, you can use a good old-fashioned hammer and a nail. Find your stud and do the exact same thing, and then finish it off just like that. So here we have the nail, we have the 18 gauge brad nails, and then we have the 23 gauge pin holes. What you want to go and pick up is this DryDex spackling, and it's actually pink on the inside, and it goes on the wall pink, but it dries white. So what you want to do is you want to find your holes and just go over them just like that. Now you can use a putty knife if you want, or just do them with your finger. Now as this dries, it will shrink. So what you want to do is you want to leave it slightly proud, and when they do dry and shrink, we're actually going to sand it down smooth, which will allow you to prime and paint it. Okay, now that our spackling is dry, you can actually come back in and start sanding it. And you can also use a block. So if your trim does not look like this, it actually comes out like this, there is a way to fix it, and we'll tackle that next. So I'll use my brad nailer just to secure it to the wall, and what you want to do is you do want to get your brad nails to go into your stud. So we'll just shoot 2 here, and then we'll just shoot 1 more right there. So if your brad nails are proud, what you want to do is you want to use a hammer and your punch, and you just want to sink those in ever so slightly. Okay, same thing we did for the other side. What you want to do is now use your DryDex. So grab a fingertip full, and again, you're just applying it over the holes, making sure that it is proud, because once it does dry, it will shrink. So once you finish your trim and you're left with this gap, what you want to do is you want to grab some Alex Plus DAP. And this thing is rated for windows and door frames. It is paintable in 30 minutes, so that's great. It's a fast drying time. And what you want to do is open this tube up, and it actually has grooves on the tip, and they're angled at a 45 degree. What you want to do is you want to cut that on a 45. What works best is to take your needle nose pliers and squeeze this edge a bit, just so it narrows that gap and it gives you the ability to get in the corner much better. So before you start, you want to make sure you grab a wet paper towel, something to wet your finger with, because we will be cleaning this up with either our finger or a tool like this. So what you want to do is you want to start at the bottom and slowly start to squeeze the DAP out and work your way up to the top. And once you have a nice bead, what you want to do is wet your finger with the towel, start at the bottom, and just work your finger all the way up. Okay, and if you do have gaps like this, you can actually come back in and start to fill it. And again, moist finger, work your way up until you're happy with the result. It might take a couple swipes before it's perfect, but you should be able to kind of work your way through it. If you do see grooves or edges, again, you can use your finger. Wipe it as many times as you need. Keep your finger wet or moist. And there you go. You can see our 3 holes here. Take your sandpaper. And sand that down. Same with the corners. Now you definitely don't want to do this when your DAP is wet. So give it time to cure. And you can see here, it's slowly disappearing. You keep sanding it until it's smooth. Sands up here. Now I did hit the corner with the sandpaper, so we'll actually come back, touch up the DAP. It's okay. But you definitely don't want to do it at the same time as this is drying, so give this 30 minutes or so before you start sanding down your spackle. So for my test rig, I also set up a pseudo chair rail. So if you ever do install, a 3-foot or 4-foot chair rail, pretty much works the exact same as your baseboard. If you do mark out your studs and you shoot in your brad nails, you want to make sure that you're hitting your studs. And it's the same process whether you use your nailer, your hammer, or your pin nailer will be going in and filling that as well. You can come back in here and with your finger just put that DryDex in, level it off. You can leave it proud because we'll come back and we'll be sanding that down. And same thing up here. It's a bit easier on the 23 gauge. What you want to do is you want to take your sandpaper and wherever you fill that in, you're going to sand that down so that it's flush and it's ready to paint. So whenever you're happy with it and all the holes are filled, you can't feel them with your finger, you can stop. You don't need to take the primer off by sanding too much. But once you're happy with it and you can't feel anything, you can pretty much stop and you're good to go. So if you do install chair rail, and I just put a test piece of chair rail here, what you want to do is kind of the same thing you did with the baseboards. You want to take your DAP and the same process. You want to find that edge and slowly start working your way through the edge and just filling in the gap between the drywall and the chair rail. Take your time, but same process. Make sure you got your paper towel, your wet paper towel, wet your finger, and just run it slowly through the drywall. Wipe off the excess if you do have any. Just come back and do that again. And it provides you a nice solid finish with the edge, and then you can come back and you can paint this. So again, you can wipe your finger over it and get all that excess. So the before is here. You can see there's a small gap between your drywall and your chair rail, and then that DAP really fills it in nicely. So in a lot of homes, including mine, there is a gap between the drywall and the baseboard, and this is where DAP is fantastic. You can do the same process, go along the edge, fill the hole, and if you do have gaps, you can just come back in, fill it again, get your paper towel, and just wipe your finger and get the excess. And it just provides a nice clean finish, and you can see the before and the after, it looks 10 times better. Now for some reason, if you do install this piece with the saw blade cut, you can actually use this DryDex. Now, it'd probably be better just to recut this piece, but if it was your last piece and you can't, you can also use this to fill it in. So I'll quickly show you that here. Same process as the corners, but you can get in there, fill all the holes, make sure that it's proud because it will shrink, and then we'll come back in and sand that. Okay guys, now that you have given it sufficient time for the DryDex to dry, you can actually come back in with your sandpaper and start sanding it down. If you remember, we had a giant saw cut in this baseboard. Now you wouldn't want to install it like that, but if you happen to, you can go back in and sand it down. You can start to see it smoothing out, so what you want to do is just take your time and work your way down to the profile of the baseboard. You can also use your sanding block if you want to get into the edges, and you can start to kind of build your profile from the baseboard. So you can see in the straight cuts, this little groove will actually help you profile out your baseboard and make it look somewhat close to the original. So you can keep working with your sandpaper, going over it, and when you're happy, you can stop, but you can kind of see it now taking shape. And one tip that you can use is just kind of put a bend on your sandpaper and kind of work that groove that matches the baseboard, and you can start to see it taking shape. There we go. And the other thing you can do is actually use a putty knife if you want to add in the extra groove. And come back with your sand block and start to sand it down. There we go, guys. Obviously not ideal. You'd never want to install something with a saw cut right through it, but it is possible to cover up pretty significant damage with the DryDex. Just give it sufficient amount of time to dry, sand it, and you can also recoat it if you dig or sand it too much. You can actually recoat it with your DryDex and come back in for a second coat. But I like the look of this. It's pretty much good to sand. There's a couple of things here that I can sand down if I really wanted to, but kind of shows you what's possible with the DryDex.